Hi, ladies and gentlemen, Terry Martin, and I'm joined once again with Jeff Berkowitz of Public Affairs TV in Chicago. And Jeff, it's been a strange week. So many different things going on, both internationally and domestically, and here in Illinois. One of the things that we want to focus on, this is an election year. We obviously, at this point, have Governor Pritzker running against Darren Bailey, the same man he ran against 4 years ago and defeated. A lot of people are not happy with those choices. Even the Republicans are saying Darren Bailey, is probably set to lose again in their opinion. But now there is possibly a new candidate emerging that you have some information on. So why don't you give us a lowdown on what's going on in the Illinois governor's race?
Collin Corbett, about 40 years old, having his own consulting firm for 10 to 20 years, somewhere in there, called Core Strategies, has become disenchanted, he said, with the Republican Party. I'm paraphrasing. And so he had a podcast for the last 3 years called Smoke-Filled Room, and he announced on what he thinks is the final episode of a weekly podcast that he did this last week, said he'll be announcing formally after his petitions are signed that he's running for governor as an independent. So he said informally, he made his announcement. And he left the Republican Party, but as he said, he didn't leave the Republican Party. He says the Republican Party left him.
So, how many signatures would he need to get on the ballot, and by when does he need to get those?
The law says he needs 25,000, and by the end of May, whenever that is about.
So he's got 30 days to get 25,000 signatures and get them down to the Illinois Board of Elections and have them looked at and approved. Sounds like a tough challenge if he's going to do it. Do we know anything about what resources he has, if he has any, to make this happen?
Well, he has a consulting firm, he has said he's got supporters. He has plans that he'll have. He has pledged $1 million that should cover the cost of getting the signatures. He's going to pay for those signatures, and he knows that he doesn't want to get just 25,000 because he could have some challenges. So he'll look to get 50,000 to make sure he has 25,000 good signatures, as we say in Cook County.
The other thing is people don't know. I think most people have never heard of him. He's never been, as you say, a candidate before. He has been working on political campaigns. We should say he was doing apparently some work for Don Tracy, the Republican Senate candidate, and I believe he's now left the Tracy campaign to start his own campaign. Is he viewed as you say a moderate? So I guess he's trying to. I guess he sees a pathway to victory in between the governor and Darren Bailey.
Look, here's what he said. He said he got into politics a long time ago when he was 20 or so because he wanted to help people. And he says the political parties, both the Democratic and the Republican parties, are no longer trying to help people. The Democrats, he says, are all about hating Trump. And the Republicans are responding by they're all about hating Democrats. And he said he was crying when he announced this on his podcast, literally crying because he was thinking about how he came into politics with such good intentions to help people. And now the Republicans can't understand how there can be a as he put it, pro-union Republican, which he says he is, pro-union. They can't understand.
Well, before let's do this. I got a clip here. Why don't we play it so people can see? He was part of a podcast here called Long Nine Studio. This bite runs about 46 seconds. Collin Corbett is identified in here, but just in case, he is the one on top speaking. And let's just hear what he sounds like when he's talking about. He's talking about a bit about Donald Trump in this bite.
It sickened me to watch faith leaders line up behind Trump and hold him up as some sort of religious symbol or some moral person. Listen, I do politics for a living. If you want to support him because he's the right political choice, I have no and had no problem with that. But they were trying to create this world in which he was something that Trump never was. And you can look through my social media history where I said, when suddenly people were clutching their pearls in late 2016 because things came out about Trump and they're like, oh, I can't believe he said that. Like, you knew who he was when you got behind him and said he was some moral human being. Again, maybe you support him because politically you agree with him, and that's fine. But stop pretending that he's something he's not, and certainly stop blurring that line between our faith and our politics.
So, like a lot of Republicans that we hear from time to time, he's taken issue with Donald Trump. He's saying it's okay if you want to do it. Relative, though, to the idea that the Republicans are anti-union, I find that odd that he's against Trump, because Trump has probably been in many ways the most pro-union president in many decades, in that, maybe with the exception of Ronald Reagan, who was one time a union president. But I mean, Trump invited the head of the Teamsters Union to come and speak to the Republican Party. So I guess I don't take his point that under Trump, the Republican Party is anti-union.
No, and that wasn't his point. He's a confused young man. He reminds me, and I know Collin a little bit. He's a nice enough guy. I'm not saying he isn't. Haven't talked probably in 5 or 10 years. But he's looking at his podcast, taking him for his word, what he said. He's just a confused guy. He sounds like a 20-year-old kid out of college and doesn't really know whether he or she is a Republican or Democrat or what that means. And he just doesn't like the idea that two women have died, and the Republican Party doesn't seem concerned, and maybe they're responsible. He didn't quite say it, but that's what he thinks. He doesn't understand that this fighting that's been going on with ICE, you got to understand about what sanctuary cities are and sanctuary states, and we don't have time to go into all that, and why these 2 people may have died, how one person was urging on her wife to step on the gas as a law enforcement officer was telling her, ma'am, please get out of your car. She stepped on the gas. Another law enforcement officer might have thought she was going to hit another one. Is that tied
to his running?
Yeah, that's the silliness that's involved here. And that's the silliness that's...
Well, look, we'll find out. We don't even know if he'll be on the ballot. I don't want to spend more time on his campaign. Let's find out if he makes it on the ballot, and then maybe we can revisit it and do an interview with him. In the meantime, the other big news is a U.S. Supreme Court ruling overruling what had been the Voting Rights Act of 1965. I'll let you talk about, but before we start, recently the House Speaker in Illinois was trying to pass an amendment to the Illinois Constitution. He has now dropped that in light of the Supreme Court case that Jeff will be talking about it some detail. But first, let's play what House Speaker Chris Welch of Illinois said when he was recently interviewed by WGN Channel 9 on the issue of why he wanted to amend the Illinois Constitution.
That Voting Rights Act became law, there were 5 people that looked like you and I in the United States Congress. Today, because of the Federal Voting Rights Act, it's the most racially diverse Congress in the history of our country. That's because of the Voting Rights Act. And Republicans all across this country, in Texas, in North Carolina, in Missouri, they're passing maps to erase black representation. What we're trying to do is enshrine the language of the Federal Voting Rights Act into the Illinois Constitution to protect and make things stronger for the people of Illinois and to be able to continue to have a diverse legislature like we do today. Yes.
So, Jeff, there you go. In your estimation, you're going to give us the background now. Why don't you just update us on where this stands and why the House Speaker withdrew his efforts to amend the Illinois Constitution?
Well, let's just say, number one, that statement was made prior to him knowing about the Supreme Court decision that was handed down this week. So it's a little bit out of order. He's since made some comments that changed everything. But more importantly, the Supreme Court decision, Calais v. Louisiana, thereabouts, maybe Louisiana versus Calais, the decision says that The Constitution says essentially that it makes explicit that the Constitution allows courts to consider race in the very narrow situations where it is truly necessary to remedy discrimination. But those situations are exceptions under this ruling, not the rule. And those exceptions are intended to be a judicial fix for when there's been too much use of race by the legislative map makers. Okay, so the court is trying to correct a decision. It's a reminder to Speaker Welch, if he's listening. He should know that the Civil Rights
the House
Act
Speaker?
was passed. Yeah, Speaker Welch should know that 1964, when he was a bit younger, there was the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which was to ban racial discrimination all over by anyone.
And we should say that was basically the beginning of the civil rights movement. I mean, at least going through Congress, there were a series of bills, and what I think the Supreme Court, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think what the Supreme Court of today is saying is that we have now had over 60 years of corrective legislation, and when we look at the Congress today, it is, as Speaker Welch pointed out, there are minority representation, there are blacks, there are Asians, there are Hispanics. This is not 1964, 1965 time period in America. And you should no longer be picking your voters based upon the color of their skin, because the United States and the Justice Department and our laws are supposed to be colorblind. That's how I interpret it. Is that fair enough?
Right. We're not supposed to look at race. If only Speaker Welch were to read the U.S. Constitution, to read the 14th Amendment, to read the 15th Amendment, to see what they're about, should understand equal protection of the law in the 14th Amendment, in the 5th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution means everybody, white, black, brown, green, has the same rights. We don't favor people. We don't want to favor people based on race. We don't want to discriminate against people based on race. Race is not to be considered. That's the goal, Speaker Welch. Not to hurt you, not to help you, not to help me, to be colorblind. Let excellence and merit be the decider. And the Voting Rights Act, Speaker Welch, you may not realize, it came 1 year after the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It was to address these grievances, which were awful at that time, and largely, I would say, others would disagree, in the South, where you had poll taxes still, okay, where people who went to vote, they find, yeah, you can vote, but you have to pay a poll tax. Well, you can't do that. We don't have that.
I mean, this
anymore.
is the period of time when Martin Luther King gave his speech in 1963, right? The People's March on Washington, when President Kennedy was still alive. In the wake of President Kennedy's assassination, Lyndon Johnson passed the Kennedy Civil Rights Agenda. And just to remind people or inform people who don't know, Kennedy, a Democrat, was fighting a lot of Democrats in his party in the South, in Mississippi, George Wallace in Alabama, who were clinging on to what had been the discrimination and the segregation of the South. And to the credit of the United States and our democracy, we changed those laws, and that was you might say the triumph of the legislation in the mid-'60s that we're talking about here. And the Supreme Court's kind of saying that, we can't keep treating the laws of 2026 as if it's 1966.
I would just remind the speaker, in case he hasn't looked in the mirror lately, his skin pigmentation, which means nothing to me, happens to be black. Okay, so I guess he would probably be the first speaker in Illinois who happened to be black. More importantly, he is a Democrat. More importantly, the Democrats run the state of Illinois. More importantly, what are the policies they have, and are they good or bad for blacks and whites? Do they discriminate? Do they hurt people? Do we need to correct them? That's what he should be talking about. I mean, the court's decision that was handed down, Speaker Welch, it permits political gerrymandering of black voters so long as done on the same basis as the political gerrymandering of white voters, so long as they are treated the same, whites and blacks. Wrote Alito in this decision. Okay,
Why don't you repeat what Alito said? He wrote the majority opinion.
Right.
Repeat, because now tell us again what Alito said.
The court's decision permits political gerrymandering because you love to do it. The Democrats have done it. And so Alito didn't say that, but the court's decision permits political gerrymandering of black voters so long as that is done on the same basis as political gerrymandering of white voters.
So in other words, no discrimination based on the color of your skin.
Right.
And Speaker Welch, and he's right, there's been redistricting efforts, by Republicans in a variety of states, and he mentioned them. Let me just quickly point out, here just recently, this was a proposed map by the Democrats in Virginia to redistrict. And now I believe we're waiting on the Supreme Court of Virginia. People think this will be thrown out. I think especially be thrown out in light of the U.S. Supreme Court just making the decision we're talking about. So, folks, just to put this in perspective, this is a major Supreme Court decision, and it is going to impact the 2026 mid-year elections and the elections thereafter when we get to the next redistricting after the census coming up of 2030. So this is not just one of these issues where in passing, this is an issue that's, kind of the Supreme Court, in some sense, is declaring victory. Now, the three that voted against this were the three Democrat-appointed justices. Was it Kagan, Sotomayor, and Justice Jackson? So those were the three voting against it.
Kind of the three liberals, the three appointed by Democrats, happened to be three women. Just happened to be. I'm not saying that's any more significant.
Really, I think that is coincidental, but it.
Right. I'm saying, look, to me, somebody can be black or white. I judge a person, as Martin Luther King said, judge them by the content of their character, not by the color of their skin. Okay.
Here's the other. Let me. We used this clip last week. I want to replay
or their gender,
Representative Ugasti, Illinois, Dan Ugasti, spoke at a press conference. He spoke before when House Speaker Welch was still trying to pass this constitutional amendment. And I think the subtext here is the Republicans in the Illinois House would be saying you're using protecting race, protecting black voters as an excuse to enshrine in the Illinois Constitution the sort of redistricting that would permanently keep the Republicans from ever regaining the majority. Here's State Representative Dan Ugasti.
Let's be clear. Even before this latest proposal from Speaker Welch and House Democrats, the political maps in Illinois were the worst in the nation. Just when it seemed things couldn't get worse, the Democrats are now pushing House Joint Resolution Committee Amendment 27 or 28. You pick the one. They file both. We don't know which one's coming forward, but they're pretty much the same. And what are these? Nothing short of the most blatant attempt to rig the system and permanently enshrine Democrat supermajorities through a constitutional amendment.
So, Jeff, there you have it. It's a ruse to be arguing that this is about race, and the Republicans are saying, nope, it's really about a power grab by the Democrats in the House. What do you have to say?
But this is about correcting one of the major wrongs. And we've been correcting this for the last few decades. Whether it's the universities, whether it's voting, we don't want discrimination based on race. Chief Justice Roberts said in another opinion, The way to stop discriminating based on race is to stop discriminating based on race, whether it's admissions to colleges, whether it's voting, whether it's redistricting. Stop, stop, Speaker Welch, stop. That's what he said. And that's what they're saying in this opinion. And what's going to go on now, if there's been a lot of gerrymandering that was motivated by race, that can't be. And you can go ahead and redraw the maps without the motivation of race, and that's okay.
And either way, whether the House Speaker was sincere, I can't read his mind. Let's just say he was sincere about trying to protect black voters. There's certainly politics anytime involved in both Republican states and Democrat states when you're redistricting. I always think, and a lot of people think, it ought to be redistricting lines ought to be drawn up by a neutral party, some commission, and not by the legislature. But that said, I want to move along because.
Well, let me just say
quickly, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, quickly. So now what you'll see happening after this decision, Louisiana, which was the subject of this case, they were doing, because they thought they were ordered by the court to do racial redistricting. They can't, they shouldn't. They're going to head and stop with whatever they were planning to do if they hadn't had their election and adjust their maps. And that'll be now have the appropriate kind of maps blessed by the Supreme Court. Probably the Republicans will pick up a seat there. Similar in Tennessee. Probably they'll pick up a seat there, doing the same kind of.
It's hard to say at this point how many House out of 435 House districts. Hard to say how many are going to change because of redistricting.
I'm going to give you the best guess in 30 seconds.
Say it.
Florida's going to probably pick up 4 seats because they're doing this. South Carolina will probably pick up 1. Alabama and Georgia will see. This is going to be the flurry, and it's not to get you, Speaker.
Have you added up how many will change, and does it help Republicans or Democrats?
At the end of the day, I think maybe the Republicans come out a vote or two because the Democrats have already done a lot of this.
Okay, look, we're speculating. I don't want to spend more time on this. What else happened that does matter is that the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, was before Congress today presenting the president's budget, and it is a huge jump in defense spending from $1 trillion a year to $1.5 trillion. That's the proposal. We'll have to see if the Congress gives them all that they're asking for. But both under President Biden, who was giving away so many munitions to the war in Ukraine, to the Ukrainians, as well as now, since we have been engaged with the Iranians and using a number of our weapons, Hegseth says that we need to really increase to refill the munitions pantry, so to speak, because we're getting a little low, although they assure us that we have more than enough munitions in the conflict with Iran. But I want to play an exchange that he had where Hegseth is responding to Eric Schmidt, the senator from Missouri, and talking about how Hegseth is trying to clear up kind of what we've been talking about. Take the DEI, which Hegseth says has been polluting the military and diminishing our quality of fighting. Here's what Hegseth had to say on the question of getting rid of DEI.
Getting back to basics. And the key word to that is merit. We had a department that was obsessed with gender, ideology, and race, diversity, equity, and inclusion. In fact, the mantra you would hear dripping from the lips of generals and with a serious look on their face was, "Our diversity is our strength," which is the single dumbest phrase in military history. Of course, our diversity is not our strength. Our unity is our strength, our shared purpose, the flag we wear and the Constitution we serve to defend. And when you clear that debris away, whether it's Marxist ideologies or social engineering or political correctness or quotas based on gender and diversity, you get the best of the best rising up, regardless of gender, regardless of race, motivated by that environment where merit reigns. It's accountability, standards, lethality, readiness, training, all the debris wiped away.
So there you go, a powerful statement by the Secretary of War. Jeff, what's your take on what the Secretary had to say?
This ties in with what's going on in Iran, because what he's saying is the U.S. military had gotten away from what they do. excellence and lethality, essentially. There's more to it than that. But don't pay a lot of attention to political correctness and DEI and so forth. Treat everybody fair, be fair to everybody, and go for lethality. Go for standards. Make sure you have a military that can fight. And what we've shown in Iran is the United States has perhaps the strongest military in the world. Yes, they weren't up against the strongest military by any means in Iran, but they were significant, and the U.S. military destroyed something that's gotten lost on the Democratic Party. They removed the conventional means of Iran to fight. No army. Well, they got the
Well, they got the army, but we don't have any troops on land. With their army can fight against us. But we have destroyed their military establishment, their air, their navy.
They have no air force. They have no navy. They have very few missiles still left. The ability to make missiles has been gone. They launch missiles. They have nothing. They have some aspect of nuclear capability and nuclear dust left, and that has to be taken care of. So they still are a threat. This has to be fought to the end. The regime has to change somehow, some way, because until that happens, the folks who are in there will lie through their teeth and say what they will do, and then they will sneak around and come back.
I think the president is pushing for regime change. He's already established, he's already got what he went in for. Last June, we destroyed their ability to make nuclear weapons, but with our spies inside Iran and the Israeli spies system, we know that they had uranium that had been enriched, and we want to make sure that that can't fall into bad hands. So right now, of course, we're in a ceasefire period. I don't know how long that'll last, but the president right now is strangling their economy, and I think he's hoping that the IRGC, which is kind of like the SS, Nazi SS for the Iranian regime, that they will go away once they're no longer getting paid. But Jeff, we also just have to acknowledge what we all know, that the president has already killed the leadership that had existed before this war started, and now they're on about the third tier, and that's apparently part of the problem, that the United States doesn't even know who now has any power within the existence, such as it is in the Iranian government.
We know, and Trump knows, it's the Islamic National Guard Corps, as you call it, the IRGC. These are the bad guys. These are really worse probably than the mullahs. And the thing is, what Trump realizes, if he can squeeze Iran, if he can squeeze that, they don't have oil, they don't have revenue, they don't have people to pay the IRGC, then they're in trouble, because those folks are mercenaries and they'll go wherever they have to go to get money. And he's got to take care of squelching them. The IRGC. He's got to aim at that. If they have to be killed one by one, do it. If they have to be chased out of the country, do it.
Let me insert real quick, Jeff, and this could impact the elections as well as the redistricting. That right now we've got gas prices here in Springfield. They're up nearly $5 a gallon, a huge jump. I mean, it was about $2.75 before the Iran war started, so almost up 100% in the last short period. The president was asked recently, about a week ago, is it worth this price for the gas to consumers, this battle going on in Iran?
More on gasoline for the foreseeable future.
For a little while. And you know what they get for that? You know what they get for that? Iran without a nuclear weapon that's going to try and blow up one of our cities or blow up the entire Middle East.
Okay, Jeff, we only got 30 seconds left. What's your response?
Look, the president is exactly right. This is a temporary increase in prices. It's not good. It's not good for him for the midterms. But the more important thing,
they don't have any weapons. And for that, we're going to have to say goodbye. But folks, tell us what you think. We'll see you next week.